Mananasi'tu's colleagues, welcome back from the long weekend. Mananasi'tu's colleagues, we are now on Bill 13-37 COR, and I will allow the speaker to speak on the main motion. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized. Mananasi'tu's.
Mananasi'tu's, and thank you. I would move to place Bill number 13-37 COR, introduced by myself. It's an act to amend Section 83102D and add a new 83116 to Chapter 83 of Title 12 Guam Code annotated relative to increasing public notice and transparency of the actions by the Guam 21st Century Healthcare Center Committee responsible for the proposed medical healthcare campus. I'd like to move that into the third reading, and I'd like to speak on the bill.
Speaker Terlahi, you may proceed at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill 13-37 COR aims to create transparency for those responsible for the proposed medical healthcare campus. Through three provisions, the bill proposes to, 1, include representation on the 21st Century Healthcare Center Committee from the Guam Medical Society and the Guam Medical Association, representatives from the impacted municipal planning councils, and the Guam Legislature. 2, the bill proposes to apply the open government law requirements in 5 GCA Chapter 8 to the Healthcare Center Committee, its working meetings and subcommittee meetings, and to allow the public to attend those meetings. 3rd, it ensures that records of deliberation and decisions will be made available to the public. The intent, obviously, is to ensure that the people of Guam, medical providers, and the legislature are informed of the meetings, the actions, and the decisions surrounding the design, lease, and financing of the proposed medical healthcare campus by making the Guam 21st Century Healthcare Committee meeting subject to the open government law. It's to avoid the necessity for the public to have to go through FOIA, or the Freedom of Information Act, on such a big project that is being conducted on their behalf, and to ensure that the Healthcare Center Committee, subcommittees, and working groups are going to conduct their proceedings under the open government law and will include members of the medical profession. Some of these members of the medical profession have brought to our attention that their offices are located in Tamuning, and they should have a say in what's going to occur or where the new hospital will be built, what will be included in it, and this would provide them just such an opportunity to ensure that their concerns or their input is heard. Most importantly, it would give an opportunity for members of the public to attend these meetings, which to this point has not happened. In October of 2021, the Guam Legislature passed Public Law 3656, which was signed by the governor establishing this 21st Century Healthcare Center Committee. It authorized the government of Guam to enter into a contract for the design, build, finance, lease transfer, and long-term capital maintenance of the Guam 21st Century Healthcare Center. The project is currently estimated to cost $1 billion, with $1.48 million already invested by GITA into a consultant, or matrix. The open government law in 5 GCA Chapter 8 states as its purpose, the legislature declares it is the policy of this territory that the formation of public policy and decisions is public. It shall not be conducted in secret. The people of Guam do not yield their individual rights to public agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. The 36th Guam Legislature's Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture was unable to obtain meeting minutes or public notices for the 21st Century Healthcare Committee meetings after November 2021. However, GITA Board of Director meeting minutes pointed to key meetings between Matrix, the Community Defense Liaison Office, and the Governor's Office, and possible Healthcare Committee meetings. After the announcement in January of 2023 of a public hearing on this bill, GITA launched the Guam Medical Campus website, which includes steering committee highlights that extend only through October 2021, and video recordings extend only through November 2021. However, the GITA Board of Directors Real Property and Healthcare Committee reports after November 2021 and up until August of 2022 include dates of medical campus-related meetings and very general updates on the status of actions and reports. According to the reports found in the GITA regular Board of Directors meeting minutes, the Healthcare Task Force, established by Public Law 3558, has continued to meet on a regular basis since its first virtual meeting held on March 24, 2021. But it is unclear which meetings were held under the task force established in Public Law 3558 or the 21st Century Healthcare Center Committee established in October 2021 by Public Law 3656. GITA testified that there were individual meetings that occurred after the last, quote, task force, unquote, meeting in November 2021 while waiting for the completion of the medical action plan. However, most of the work was being done by the consultant as GITA was awaiting the final product. The Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture held 3 total oversights on April 8, 2021, November 18, and November 18, 2021, and October 18, 2022. Landowners testified that they had not been notified of any planning meetings regarding their lands felt bypassed in the process of planning construction of Guam's new medical campus on their ancestral lands. Additionally, the committee sent a total of 5 separate Freedom of Information Act requests in October 2021, April 2022, June 2022, October 2022, and November 2022 to the executive branch, including agencies, to seek information on the medical campus and the proposed site. Despite media quotes to the contrary, the FOIA responses did not yield any documents indicating specificity on any agreements with the federal government regarding the decision to enter into a 99-year lease, nor any document showing that the property would remain in the federal assets inventory if a hospital was not built there. Oral and written testimony on the bill indicated that FOIA requests for documents related to the medical campus in Eagles Field were being denied also to the general public and the media. One specific example provided in written testimony indicated that Guam Memorial Hospital invoked the, quote, deliberative process exclusion to several FOIA requests. A news article published by the Pacific Daily News on September 19, 2022, titled, quote, Adaloop, GITA, keep medical plan secret, unquote, outlined the newspaper's efforts through FOIA requests to GITA and Adaloop to obtain the medical campus master plan or task order 9 under matrix contract, but were denied. The article also noted that the plan was already 95% complete and that the project would cost Guam taxpayers about $1.4 billion over several decades. GITA announced in May of 2021 that it agreed to pay the contractor Matrix $1.48 million to complete 9 task orders regarding the medical campus, to include updated cost estimates and examination of alternative sites and what should happen to the current hospital when a new one is built. Another task order requires the preparation of a medical healthcare campus master plan using the findings from other tasks and to recommend a preferred location. There is a master plan on the website with recommendation, but part of this task order was to provide alternative sites for the medical healthcare campus, to give at least 2 presentations to policymakers, host at least 2 forums for the medical and public health industries before August 2022. None of these can be located on the website, and I am not aware of any presentations made to policymakers. Bill 13-37 incorporates health professionals into the Healthcare Center Committee. The GITA administrator testified that only 2 government doctors and 1 other were engaged during this process. Other doctors and industry professionals were not engaged about the moving of the medical center to Manilao, and there is no report of the impact to clinics and other support services to such as pharmacies and laboratories that make up the current medical infrastructure in Tamuning relative to delivery of service as well as economic impact. Testimony from the general public was in favor of the bill, with the original Lalu landowners and others testifying on their difficulty in obtaining information and learning of the fate of their properties, of the medical healthcare campus. And so I'm asking that the Guam Legislature, in its continued support of a new hospital, as evidenced by laws passed to establish the Healthcare Task Force in the 35th Guam Legislature and the Healthcare Center Committee in the 36th Guam Legislature, that we mandate at this point transparency. We've already authorized that the government can enter into a contract for the design, build, finance, and lease, and transfer the long-term capital maintenance of a 21st century healthcare center. We also authorized funding from EITC funds in FY22, which did not materialize, but also authorized up to $35 million per year in lease payments for up to 40 years on a lease-to-own basis. Decisions involving a project of this magnitude that impact the lives and health care of the entire island should not be made behind closed doors. And that is the simple purpose of the bill, and so I ask my colleagues for their support.
Buen provecho, Speaker Terlahi. On the main motion, I see Senator Tadegui. You are recognized on the main motion.
Sidus Masi and Hafaday to my colleagues. Good morning to everyone. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this legislation, and as you know, in the 35th Guam Legislature, I passed a bill that was unanimously supported by all my colleagues, and it became Public Law 35-58, which created a task force called Our Hospital, Our Life Planning Task Force, Espatata Ninanlata. The bill was then sent to the governor's office. And as I read her comments as to why she didn't sign it into law but allowed it to lapse into law instead, had me baffled as to why she would do this. This would bring both the administration as well as the legislature together to oversee the building of a new hospital in every aspect of the word, where it's going to be at, what is needed, what is the equipment needed inside, what other areas in the hospital that we can grow on. I even brought up the fact about the Veterans Hospital as well, incorporating it. Not only that, Madam Speaker, I even worked with Gita to find funding, a grant, about $1.4 million to assist this task force. So it's not just any task force that we've created, but it's a task force that actually has substantial funding behind it. Funding that would help bringing in experts in the field on building a new hospital. Not only that, Madam Speaker, I've worked throughout that year, the 35th, reading all the documents, 235 pages, by a prior senator who did his due diligence in creating different task force within his, he was the oversight chair of health, on the possibility of building a new hospital. All this work, almost 5 years of work, Madam Speaker, needed to be acted upon. How many times have we put things together and for the sake of showing the people, look, we have a plan, but the plan never sees the time of day. It's stacked and collected dust on our shelves. The task force that was passed into public law actually incorporated the legislature. Like this bill, Bill 13, finally incorporates into a committee that was created by the governor and failed to include us. In fact, Madam Speaker, I'm hoping that if the governor is not going to sign it, at least she lets it lapse like she did the bill that I put through on the hospital task force. And hopefully so, because according to her letter, give me 1 minute here. According to her letter to the legislature as to why she let it lapse, it was stated here. I'm just going to read the last 3 paragraphs. I am therefore obligated to strike a balance between clear legislation encroachment and my strong desire to work with the legislature on issues that matter to the people of Guam. As such, I am returning Bill 5-35 without signature. It is now Public Law 3558. I'm also asking that the Guam Economic Development Authority and Guam Memorial Hospital, the entities impacted by this measure, come together to accomplish the spirit of Bill 5-35 LS and its good intentions. I look forward to the legislature's meaningful participation in this work. Well, I hope she really means that, because now a committee that she has created, we are making an amendment to that to include the legislature, as well as those who are impacted in the health profession. So I ask my colleagues, let's be a part of this new hospital. Let's make sure our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted, and be a responsible body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Tadegui. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak? If not, Senator Fisher, I will recognize you. On the main motion.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I rise in support of this bill. I don't see any rational basis for opposition. It does nothing more than, just like on the last bill, 12-37, it just opens the window so people can see what is going on with an expenditure of $1 billion. I hope to hear some sort of an opposition to it that sounds rational, just for my own curiosity. I don't expect I will, and I expect this bill to ultimately succeed. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Senator Fisher. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Brown, I will recognize you on the main motion. Sorry, I didn't see your hand rise, but you may proceed.
No worries,
morning.
Madam Speaker. It seems like a Monday, even though it's Tuesday morning, but thank you very much. I do rise in support of this bill. I appreciate the efforts of our speaker to introduce it, and I think it's rather unfortunate once again that the legislature has to remind the governor that she is not the only branch of government, and that it's very important that something as critical and as important as building a new hospital, particularly with the large price tag that will be attached to it, it's very critical for the legislature and the members of the legislature that also represent the people of Guam are involved and engaged in this process, and also that the process be very public. The speaker had outlined all these meetings that occurred, and unfortunately, the fact that there were no records kept of these meetings, very similar to the early days of COVID when the governor had all these advisory meetings with the medical community on Guam, and those meetings were not recorded. And something as critical and fearful, of course, at the time for our people, dealing with the unknowns of COVID and what the impacts would be and how are we going to go about dealing with it, to not have those things public, especially when we all serve in a public capacity, really, begs the question as to why. This whole mongering of power on the Hill and not wanting to include the rest of the leadership in this community, and the fact that we have to assert ourselves once again to say that these actions, because you are dealing with public resource, you are dealing with public money, needs to be public. That way we can ensure that the people's money is being properly spent. I don't know what more to add, Madam Speaker. You know, it's just really dumbfounding that we have to come back again and again and again and reassert the position of the legislature. And like I said, you know, the governor served beside us for many, many years here in this very body, and she knows the role of the legislature. And moving forward, I don't know ultimately what the decision will be in building a new hospital, where it's going to be located, what the ultimate cost is going to be. I hope we build a better facility that's going to be responsive to the healthcare needs of our community. But that should not be a secret process, and certainly shouldn't be a process that's isolated simply to the administration, because we see time and time again how they very much want to pursue this practice, as if they're the only ones that are engaged in making decisions on behalf of the public. And time again, we still don't know how public money is being spent. I mean, let's go back to the federal funds that we've received for COVID. We still don't have the details of how those funds are spent. And that should not be the case with regards to public money. I think the more light that you shed on this process, the better we're going to ensure that money is being properly spent and being spent according to law. And there's no other way we should be doing it. I mean, that should be and is the standard practice. And when we see these continued exceptions of wanting to go around that process and not include the people in that process, it's very concerning. I think we're only going to get problems with regards to that, and the governor's not going to get the support she wants. I mean, this is something we should be collectively working for. If it's for the good of the people, then there's no reason why we can't have these issues meet the light of day and work in partnership with regards to ensuring that we have the ultimate end that's desired by our community. So with that, Madam Speaker, I certainly rise in support of this bill and hope that it becomes law. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Senator Brown. Anyone on the motion? Senator Barnett, then Senator Duenas. Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mananasi Joes, Biba Mes Tomorrow. I rise firmly in support of this measure. To echo the sentiments of the previous speakers, it really is a no-brainer. Also, to echo the sentiments of the previous speakers, Tatlum Biahi, here we are again, one more time, hopefully. They keep saying that this body has introduced many measures relative to transparency, relative to reporting requirements, relative to really trying to get the message through to those people who are serving down at Adelup. The very basic message that we are a government of the people and that the people deserve to know what their government is doing. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But how many times has this body and ones before it tried to get that message across? According to the research I did in the 35th and the 36th Guam Legislatures, a total of 17 measures. 17 measures relative to trying to make this administration transparent, relative to trying to make this administration report what they are doing, relative to trying to make this administration conduct its business in the light of day and not behind closed doors in secret, like they have been doing with this 21st century healthcare, billion-dollar healthcare complex. We've seen the headlines, Adelup, Gita, keep plan secret. And I don't think that just throwing things up on a website equals transparency, because right now with this 21st century healthcare complex, it's about as transparent as soy sauce finadeni. And if any of you guys had finadeni over the weekend, you know you cannot see through that. And so here we are again on measure number 18 now in trying to send the message that our people deserve to know what's going on. Because we didn't. The original landowners didn't know what was going on with this billion-dollar healthcare complex. They found out, got an extra, read all about it on the news when the governor announced this plan. And the thing that bothers me, and I think bothers the original landowners, and probably bothers some members, it should bother some members of this body, all of them, is that when we finally found out about this plan for the billion-dollar healthcare complex, it was very startling to see how far along this plan was. I mean, they pretty much had the floor plans. There was a lot of progress that had been made in planning this billion-dollar healthcare complex behind closed doors in secret. And I was at the public hearing for this measure. I was also unnerved, bothered to hear the director of GITA say that if we wanted to know what happened in those meetings, that she took notes. I don't think that's the type of transparency that the people of Guam or my good colleagues should become used to. We have set a bar with the open government law. And it was just a couple weeks ago that we were admonished by this administration in a press release that they had sent from down on the Hill to the Guam Congress Hall. Legislature encouraged to use Guam Public Notice website. And on this press release, they admonish us because apparently they believe that we didn't notice some things on a website. Yet, out of the other side of their mouth, they conduct meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting in secret, behind closed doors, away from the eyes and the ears of not just our colleagues here in the legislature, but away from the eyes and ears of the original landowners who definitely have a right to know what is going on with the status of their land, whether it's excess or not. And again, I say it's really a no-brainer, because if if we're going to be held to task and if we're going to be admonished and told to adhere to all the different laws and requirements of maintaining an open government, as we should, and I think it's only fair and less hypocritical to hold the administration to the same standard, whether it's building a billion-dollar healthcare complex or hiring above step or any number of things. And we did hear some discussion on the Freedom of Information Act process. When we talk about transparency coming out from Adelup, I think it's a shame that senators in this body and others before it have had to write Freedom of Information Act requests just to get basic information out of the administration, the line agencies, what have you. And I'll just say that sometimes we get this, oh no, if you need a document, just let us know, we'll send it all over. But the problem I think many of us have with that is that we have, at least I have, grown to take what our government, whether it's the legislature or the administration, says with a grain of salt. And so even though they say that they'll provide the documents, most times they don't. And when they do, we're faced with the documents that are incomplete, falling far short of the information that we need to make good decisions. And so again, I really believe this is a no-brainer. If we want to just take the issue, the controversial issue of the billion-dollar healthcare complex out of the equation, out of this measure, then I think at the end of the day, what this measure really is about is making sure that everybody in our government is playing by the same rules, the rules of transparency that the people of Guam should come to expect from not just senators in the 37th Guam Legislature, but governors and lieutenant governors, past, present, and future alike. And so I do ask my colleagues to support this measure. Again, it is a no-brainer, and I think the people of Guam expect us to uphold the highest standards of transparency for our government. Si Dios masi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator Barnett. Senator Dueñas, on the main motion, you are recognized. Please proceed.
Si Dios masi, Madam Speaker, and Gov bonito pagona dia, frescos and magay bonito. Madam Speaker, I certainly rise in full support of Bill 1337, and many of my colleagues have made some very eloquent remarks. I won't duplicate those remarks, but I'll make a couple of comments and maybe describe a precedence that this legislature conducts themselves in on an annual basis with regard to very similar methodology that this bill calls for. Over the weekend, Madam Speaker, I had a chance to interact with many of our constituents, and one of them in particular who has been appreciating a lot of the work many of us are doing here when it comes to check and balance and transparency, made it clear that, Senator, we send you there as our representatives. You're our voice. Because while we vote for the executive as well, the executive job is to execute the mission of the policies that have been set by the body, the representative body. So we want to continue to remind you that that's your job. Your job is to debate and set that policy. And you are our voice for as long as we vote for you and put you in there. If we don't like the way you represent our voice and you run again, we can easily change your voice. And I was well reminded of that, and I took it very well. Madam Speaker, every year as we debate the annual budget, one of the things we do is prepare for the insurance policy for our government of Guam employees. And even in a procurement that is very tightly held and has to be for the purposes of not releasing proprietary information, this legislature has a representative. I would imagine the wisdom of that representation, Madam Speaker, was because first and foremost, it's a plan. It's a plan that has a lot of details. It's a plan that's going to affect our entire government, and we're using public resources for that. And the second is because it requires an appropriation, Madam Speaker. That's what we do. One of the three key responsibilities and only responsibilities of this body is to pass an annual budget, the power of the purse. For that purpose and that purpose alone, Madam Speaker, it's only sensible that we have a role in how this plan rolls out. The other issue, Madam Speaker, I would imagine, and hopefully, if Bill 1237 passes and becomes law, as I hope it will and anticipate it will, we will also be required, in the event that a site location is required for a lease requirement, that this body is a part of that. That all encompasses exactly what this noble endeavor, which we all agree with in terms of enhancing our medical care on Guam, ensuring that we have a state-of-the-art hospital that serves our public alongside what we have now in the private sector. But in that process, as I close, Madam Speaker, because I know you're familiar with many of those who put together, as you were part of that group, there was so much representation when our private hospital was put together. There was so much transparency. There were radio shows. There were times that senators were consistently brought along. I attended many of those meetings with the former Margaret Bengzon, who at the time was the CEO, and saw the plan to fruition. They would host us at hotel banquet rooms and the like to give us a rundown of exactly where they were through every phase of that operation. And that was a private endeavor. Of course, they got tax credits, so I'm sure that they wanted us to look favorably upon their process and procedure. I support those because we need it. We need it. We need it then. We need it now. We need it now more than ever. It's just a couple of examples, Madam Speaker, that all we're really calling for here at this point is to ensure what we've already set in this body as precedents throughout any major undertaking, that those who will be responsible for appropriating the resources to be able to follow through on that, and those who will probably be involved in some sort of issues with regard to land requirements, zoning, you name it, supporting the executive or having to take a role one way or the other, it will be this body, Madam Speaker. So for that reason, I hope and pray that our colleagues will see the wisdom in this wise proposal. This is not designed, Madam Speaker, to micromanage. This is designed so that when we deliberate as a body, we're deliberating on the basis of having all the information required to make a final decision. Madam Speaker, we're all aware, and I don't think it's changed, between the prior legislature and the legislature now, 36th and 37th, there is going to be required a funding source to execute the mission. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that we follow through the entire process. Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak in support of Bill 1337.
Buen provecho, Senator Duenas. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas, you are recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to say something on live TV. I think it's a wonderful bill. It's a good bill. Transparency is the foundation of trust. And if we're going to do something as significant as spend $1 billion, I think we should shine the light on it and allow people to see what's happening and going on with the process. So I support the bill. It's a wonderful bill. It's a good bill. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator St. Nicholas. Anybody else on the main motion? Senator Will Parkinson, on the main motion, I will recognize you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we think we could take a quick recess? I have 2 amendments being uploaded, and I'd like to take a quick recess just so my colleagues have a chance to review them.
I will allow just a moment's recess, Senator Parkinson. You're on recess. Imina Chantay Shetty na Liheslaturan Guåhan is back from recess. Colleagues, we have two amendments as proffered by the senator from Mighty, and we're going to entertain both of them at this time. All of you should have had copies provided to you. If not, it is also on the Google Drive. Senator Parkinson, I will acknowledge you at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the latitude you've given me. I, for the most part, stand in support of this bill, but there are a couple technical changes I'd like to make. The first one being requiring an appointee or a confirmed appointee of the Speaker rather than a member of the legislature itself. I feel that the bill as written potentially places a member of the legislature in an executive branch committee which violates separation of powers. More appropriately, the Speaker should designate a person and have that person be confirmed by the legislature. And then the other one is requiring financial disclosures on additional people. With so much money on the line, financial disclosure requirements would ensure that there are no conflicts of interest,
Senator,
and that the process is even more
I
transparent.
do apologize. We'll go ahead and entertain one amendment at a time per the standing rules. So we'll go ahead and colleagues entertain line 19 to 20, page 2, which is deleting the legislative committee all the way up to designee, comma, then designee of the Speaker confirmed by the legislature. Anyone wishing to speak on this amendment? Senator Tom Fisher, you are recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. I rise to ask a question of the gentleman from Mighty.
Please state your question first.
The question is this, Madam Speaker. Could the gentleman clarify which language is being substituted? Because I'm reading it two different ways. I just heard the Speaker characterize this as a way I frankly didn't understand it. I thought this amendment was a tag to the entire paragraph.
Senator Parkinson, would you like to yield to that question?
Yeah, sure. And this is for line 19, the First Amendment we're discussing? Yeah, what it is I was looking at the bill as written, and it seemed to put a member of the legislature potentially on an executive committee. And so I think a rather more appropriate way to go about it would be a designee of the Speaker confirmed by the legislature to avoid any issue with separation of powers.
Senator Fisher, does
Yeah.
that help?
Yes, it does. And Madam Speaker, may I follow up with a comment?
Yes, you may proceed.
Madam Speaker, I wonder if our legal counsel thinks that there might perhaps be a constitutional issue with...
I'm going to take Senator Fisher, I'm going to take a moment's issue to confer with legal on this matter. Moment's recess. Iminatrentai Shetty Liheslaturan Guåhan is back from recess. Senator Parkinson, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to withdraw my amendment to proffer a new one to fix the concerns.
Thank you. On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator Parkinson, I will allow you for the amendment.
Yeah, I'd like to, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to motion to add an amendment to amend the bill so that the Speaker of the Legislature or their designee will be the one appointing onto the Healthcare Committee.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. On that motion, are there any objections? Senator Taitagui, I recognize you on that amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do understand that what this amendment does basically is just takes it away from the jurisdiction on the chairperson that's holding health, the Committee on Health. And I really think this is the area where it should be at. We all know that this hospital is going to take years, to build. And I would just hate to see that someone who has all that information and access as a committee chair on health when it comes to the hospital, public health, or anything else that has healthcare matters involved, not sit on this committee. It only makes sense. This year, it's fortunate that not only the speaker is our speaker, but she's also the committee chair on health. But what happens after in a couple years? I think this, where it's at right now, makes sense, total sense. And definitely somebody who's involved from the very beginning. So I stand in objection of that. I understand the intent of the good author for this amendment, but I have to object. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitagui. There has been an objection. All those in support of Senator Parkinson's amendment, please signify by raising, or Senator Parkinson, would you like to close?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. Really, the intent of this is, I believe that there is a case to be made for the separation of powers, and a member of the legislature should not be on an executive committee board. That being said, I'm proffering this amendment in an effort to fix that. Let's just try to get a designee on that. I'm in support of this bill, but I want to make sure that we respect separation of powers in so much as we do. That's my statement. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or Madam Speaker.
On that motion, there has been an objection. All those in favor of the Parkinson amendment, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion fails. Senator Parkinson, I will allow you the floor. I know you have a second amendment. Please introduce that at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to amend line 24 of page 2 to amend Bill 13-37 to read, members of the 21st Century Healthcare Senate Committee are officials for the purposes of Title 4, Chapter 13, Guam Code Annotated, the Public Official Disclosure Act, and shall file a financial disclosure pursuant to that chapter. I am not opposed to more members being added to the Healthcare Committee. That being said, though, I always have to ask who watches the watchers. In the interest of full transparency and avoidance of any conflicts of interest, I think that any members that we should add to this committee should be in parity with everybody else and file the same financial disclosures as required by the open government laws. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Fisher, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. I would suggest, though, that after the word designee on the first line, we include language notwithstanding any other provision of law. That being said, I do support this. I like the idea of seeing how officials on this particular committee are making money. and whether or not they have an interest undisclosed in anything related to the construction of the hospital. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. You have an amendment to this one saying notwithstanding?
Yeah, I know that floor amendments are supposed to be written.
I understand, but I just want to say that after the word designate period, you want a notwithstanding verbiage in there.
Notwithstanding
Okay.
any other provision of law, members of the Guam,
Yeah.
et cetera.
I'm going to take a moment's recess just so legal can write it out.
Okay, thank you.
Imina Chanta Shatina Liheslaturan Guåhan is back from recess. Colleagues, there is a motion to amend the Parkinson Amendment by adding notwithstanding any other provisions of law. On that motion, but as proffered by Senator Fisher, are there any objections? Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. On the amendment as amended, on that motion, does anyone else wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Senator Teresa, I will give you an opportunity to speak on the amended as amended. On the amendment as amended.
Thank you. I rise in support of the amendment, but I just wanted to put on the record, so the amendment would require that members of this healthcare center committee file a financial disclosure form, which is required of all elected officials every year. So the actual act, the Public Official Disclosure Act, requires it of all elected officials already. officials appointed by Imagalahi or Magahaga, whose appointment is subject to the consent of Liheslaturan Guåhan, except ex officio student members and boards and commissions. It also applies to the chief executive officers by whatever title they may be known of all agencies and instrumentalities of the government of Guam, and all individuals who are given or delegated authority by an elected official or appointed official to have sole authority to enter into contracts for procurement or approve change orders. So, and then when we look at the actual current composition of the 21st Century Healthcare Center Committee, it is the administrator or deputy administrator of GITA, administrators and directors of all healthcare agencies, director or deputy of public works, director or deputy of land management, director or deputy of BSP, Bureau of Statistics and Plans, director or deputy of BBMR, director or deputy of the Department of Administration. So there's just, I think, the additions that we are adding. Mayors are already required to disclose as well, so it would probably just be the additional medical professionals. But I have no objection. I support this amendment.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Tadegui, you are recognized on that amendment.
Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to stand in support of this amendment. I think we find way too many times that people are slipping through the cracks sometimes when it comes to financials, and it's there for a reason, you know, a huge reason, to make sure that the money that we put forward is spent correctly, and that if anybody has any shenanigans going on, I like to use my shenanigans, they'll have to think twice to do so. Now, I noticed too that the two individuals that would be appointed by the Medical Society, I'm just hoping this doesn't deter them from joining this committee, because it's very important to have people who work in this facility that would be utilizing it to bring their institutional knowledge to the table. So I'm hoping that, you know, they do join this committee with no reservations at all. But in order to do that, they would have to show their financials. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do rise in support of this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Tadegui. On the motion, if there's no one else wishing to speak, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Senator Parkinson. On the main motion, are there anyone else wishing to speak? If Senator San Agustin, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I rise in support of the bill, but I just ask my colleagues that in the future, so we don't have any of our colleagues here talking about 17 different measures for transparency, that any bill that's introduced that impacts your committee, ask or amend the bill to add your committee, so we don't have to do this. And the reason why I bring this up, because this 3656 was a bill I introduced, and it was supported, and I would have no objection. We would have added everybody. Anybody wants to be added, I would support that. And for reason of transparency. And that hopefully future bills will just nip this, and we move on. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator San Agustin. Senator Jesse Lohan, on the main motion. You are recognized.
Madam Speaker, Enrique Niso. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I stand in full support of Bill 37-COR. It's really, as been said earlier, it's a common sense bill. It's a public hospital being funded by public funds. It should have public involvement, public participation, public scrutiny. And so as those of you who remember back in the 60s, the Fifth Dimension, they said, "Let the sun shine in," their song, "Let the sun shine in." So the more the sunshine is put upon the things that are being done with public funds, the better it is. So again, thank you, Madam Speaker, in full support of Bill 13-37. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Lon. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Terlai, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues, Sidus Masi, for all your statements in support of the bill. And I do want to recognize that, yeah, it is Senator San Augustine, our colleague from Dedido, or Jigo, that passed the original legislation establishing this committee. And I'd like to add, as co-sponsors to the bill, those again who attended the public hearing, and it was a part of, you know, that series of public hearings that really went for many hours. And if I could add Senator Tello Taitagui, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Frank Blas, Senator Jesse Lujan, Senator Sabina Perez. I'd also like to add Senator Chris Duenas and Dwayne Sinicolis this morning.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Speaker Talai, I'll still recognize you.
Thank you. So in closing, I just, want to, reaffirm that it is the goal of the bill that with a project of this magnitude that commits the people of Guam's resources for decades to come, and one that impacts the health care of every resident of this island, it is imperative that this process is made more transparent so that the public is brought along, stakeholders can state their concerns, and all of us can understand every decision made along the way, so that in the end, when bearing the burden of the costs, the people of Guam are satisfied with the product and the value that they received, especially now when there are so many variables that remain at play and that will impact stakeholders and the public in years to come. So thank you again to my colleague, Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
On the motion.
I renew my motion to place the bill into third reading as amended.
Thank you. So on the motion, thank you, Speaker Talai. So on the motion, colleagues, to place Bill number 13-37 COR to the third reading voting file. Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader on the motion. Yeah, I'm sorry, Senator Parkinson, I will address you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to go back to legislative concurrence.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. Please proceed, Senator Parkinson. Oh. Was there an objection to move back to concurrence to put a board member on?
Point of inquiry, Madam Speaker. Just
State your point of inquiry.
Yeah, just finding out why we are going back to motions and concurrence.
We are going back to legislative concurrence to add a board member into the third reading file that we didn't do earlier.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, can you say that again? It was a little bit
We are
muffled.
going back to legislative concurrence so that we can add a member who was included in the Committee on Rules that need to go through. So is there still an objection, Senator Taitagui?
No, there's no objection. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so very much. Senator Blas, I will recognize you, Minority Leader.
Just for the purposes of explaining, that was supposed to be in concurrence. I basically had the clerk go back because there was some correction that was necessary, just for clarity within the committee report. Everything, but it had cleared already, the committee.
Thank you, Minority Leader, so noted. So on the motion, is there any objection? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator Parkinson, please state your motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Fire, Agriculture, Power and Energy Utilities, Public Transit, Unemployment Insurance, and Universal Health Care the nomination of Janae A. Uggan to serve as a member, Governor's Representative of the Guam Regional Transit Authority Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator Parkinson. Okay, thank you, Senator Parkinson. Majority Leader Shelton, you are recognized at this moment.
So just Masi, Madam Speaker, I move that we recess until 5 p.m. today for voting.
Si Diyos mahasi on that motion without any objection. Motion carries. We will be back for 5 o'clock voting.